Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation. We are a group of fourth year veterinary students at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine, and today we'll be chatting to you a little bit about parasites in the shelter. So this will include what it looks like when animals have parasites, what parasites we're looking for, and some things we can do to help prevent them. So one of the first things we might ask ourselves about parasites in our shelter animals is, why do we care? So firstly, a lot of our parasites can cause disease and discomfort in our pets. So like this little photo here of this cute little puppy with a big old belly. This can be a common thing we can see in them. So when they have lots and lots of intestinal parasites, it can lead to this sort of abdominal distension, making it pretty uncomfortable for them. But there's lots of other diseases and things that can happen to our pets when they have lots of parasites, and these can obviously cause quite a bit of distress. So those blood-sucking parasites that can cause things like anemia, of course, things like diarrhea can happen. And those are obviously all things that we're concerned about in our pets. Another important aspect of parasites in our shelters is the fact that they can spread to other animals. So of course this is even more important in a shelter environment when there's lots of different critters and creatures around. And so that means that parasites can pretty rapidly spread amongst a population. And obviously this is pretty important for us to consider because our main goal is to adopt these animals out at the end of the day. And if they are carrying parasites, that can also spread into other pets in the homes of those adopting them. And with that in mind, parasites can also spread to people. So this is a really big reason why we're concerned about parasites in our pets. So things like ringworm in this picture here, pretty gross. And these can cause pain in us and disease in us as well. So this is important not just for the safety of us working in the shelters, but also for the safety of the people in the homes that we're adopting animals out to. So just for our general knowledge, there are specific groups of animals that are at a greater risk of contracting parasites. So first and foremost, that includes our shelter animals. And again, as I mentioned, this is just because there is a lot of them in one area. And also, a lot of the time we don't know their background. So we don't know if they've had deworming in the past or they've had any sort of parasite control or prevention given. So with this in mind, it's pretty easy for them to spread throughout the population within a shelter. Other busy areas can cause animals to be at risk. So this includes things like dog parks or the groomers, especially when there's things like feces around, because a lot of our parasites can be obtained by eating our feces. So, and then things like young animals with poor immune systems, and also things like animals on raw diets, they can be more predisposed to having parasites that can spread amongst other animals and people. So some symptoms that we can look for, these can be mild to no symptoms. So pretty much no signs. Maybe they're a little bit itchy. Maybe they have some soft stool. It's kind of a sliding scale from mild to severe. So they might not have any signs. Sometimes they might have some moderate signs. So if they have parasites on the outside of their body that are really itchy, if they have a little bit of anemia from blood-sucking parasites, some coughing can occur for parasites in the respiratory tract, poor growth, diarrhea, that sort of thing. And it can go all the way to really severe disease where we have animals that are really emaciated, that are undergoing a lot of weight loss. They can be depressed or very anemic, alongside a lot of other symptoms as well. But these are just some red flags to look for. And just to visualize that a little bit, something like a little kitten that comes in with no signs or maybe some really mild itching at its ears, they might still have a parasite burden or ear mites or that sort of thing, but then show mild to no signs at all. Then, of course, we have some maybe more moderate signs with dogs with some pretty bad diarrhea, that sort of thing, or even as severe as this picture here of this cat that is very thin or emaciated from disease. And of course, it is worth mentioning that especially sicker animals or younger animals who are more predisposed to getting parasites, they can actually die from a severe parasite burden. So another good reason why we want to control parasites.
How do pets pick up parasites? In the Saskatoon area, there are many different ways pets come into contact with parasite and their eggs. In general, parasites produce a lot of eggs. So anytime a pet goes to an area that's been frequented by other dogs and cats, such as dog parks or common walkways in the neighborhood, they can pick up eggs from the environment just by sniffing, licking, checking out their surroundings. Obviously, dogs that are poop eaters are at much higher risk since feces carry a high egg burden. Pets that come in contact with wildlife, like dogs that chase and kill rabbits or mice, or cats that are outdoors and are hunting, are also exposed to a lot of different parasites. Additionally, puppies and kittens many times are already born with worms that they get from their dam. Likewise, nursing can also transmit parasites. I'll be going over the most common and important parasites found in the Saskatoon area. They can be generally classified into two large groups: the endoparasites, which are the worms that live inside the dog or cat, or ectoparasites, which live on the outside of dogs or cats. First off, I will be covering roundworms. These worms are super common, especially in kittens and puppies. They are generally born with infestation of these worms already. They pick them up in utero from their dam. They also get re-exposed and reinfected through nursing, and they can be picking up eggs from their litter mates. Bad infestations of roundworms typically look like a pot-bellied puppy with disheveled hair coat. They can be vomiting, they may have diarrhea, and you may see roundworms in the vomit or diarrhea. Hookworms. They are commonly found in puppies, but not so common in kittens. Puppies are many times infected before birth, and they can also get it through their mother's milk. They can be shedding worms and reinfecting themselves amongst the litter. Severe symptoms of hookworm infestations can lead to blood loss and very anemic puppies. You can see very pale gums. You may also see weight loss, bloody diarrhea, dull, dry hair coat, and failure to grow, and the severe infestations can lead to death. Next up are tapeworms. There's many different types of tapeworms that both dogs and cats can get. Generally, the tapeworm itself does not cause a huge problem in the dog or a cat. You can't see many symptoms. However, usually people pick up on them when they see the little segments that drop off the big long worm, and you might find them hanging outside of an anus, kind of like in this picture where you've got that white segment hanging off the cat's anus. And that's usually the trigger when people know to start treating for them. Ear mites and demodex. Ear mites are big problems in many kitten populations, especially in shelter settings. They look like coffee grounds in the ear canal and are super itchy. There may be evidence of scratching and scabs all around the ears where the cat has been trying to relieve its itch. Demodex mite overpopulation can be found in both young dogs and young cats. These mites are actually found naturally on the skin of cats and dogs. However, when you have young animals whose immune system are not fully mature, or you have otherwise immunocompromised animals, they cannot keep the demodex population in check, and it starts to become an issue. Symptoms are itchiness, red irritated skin, hair falling out. Usually it's all over the body, but you can also have more localized infections where you have focal points of itchiness and hair falling out. Lice and fleas. Both of these can be seen as bugs crawling on the pet's fur and cause them to be itchy, lose hair, have red skin, or scabs. For lice, you may see the actual adult bugs crawling on the fur, or you may see the small eggs called nits glued to the bottom of the hair shafts. Lice are pretty host specific and won't infect cross species. Fleas tend to affect both cat and dog populations that live in high densities and mix with other animals. Fleas are very contagious, so if you have multiple animals sharing the same space, it's important to treat all of them. It's also important to note that fleas can go from a dog, can infest a cat. Ticks are very common in the Saskatoon area, as most people are well aware of. They become a big problem in spring and last until fall. The most common places that a dog or cat will pick up ticks are in areas where the grass is long. So running along the riverbanks or through the bush at dog parks are good places to pick them up. However, even city center neighborhoods have tick populations that dogs and cats can come in contact with.
I'll be covering shelter biosecurity. Here in the slide, you can see some things that we're going to talk about to use to maintain biosecurity, as well as some things that should be avoided. On this slide, we'll be discussing internal parasites of dogs and cats, some of the common ones that you might encounter in a shelter environment. On the left, we have roundworms. There are a few different species and a couple of genera, although you don't have to worry too much about that. The first one, Toxocara canis, is a species of roundworm with adults that live in dog intestines, and the adults cause eggs to be shed in the feces in individuals as young as 3 to 4 weeks old. Newborn puppies can get the parasite transplacentally, i.e., from their mother before birth, or via milk. Any dog can ingest eggs in the environment, most commonly in dirt or through eating feces, and begin shedding eggs 3 to 4 weeks afterward when the eggs have developed into adults. Toxocara cati is similar, but is shed by cats instead of dogs, as young as 6 weeks old that have been exposed via mum, and generally it takes at least 8 weeks for older cats to begin shedding after exposure, and it's quite common in cats. It is wise to assume that any cat or dog that has been roaming at large, as well as any puppy or kitten, has been exposed to roundworms. This means that the feces of newly arrived dogs and cats that have not been dewormed should be treated as though they contain roundworm eggs. To minimize the risk of transmission, feces should be removed promptly to prevent other dogs from interacting with them. Note that it takes the eggs at least 2 weeks and longer in colder temperatures from the time of defecation to mature to the point where they can grow into adults if they happen to be ingested. However, they can survive in the environment even after feces has been removed or disintegrated for months to years, although they survive less well in dry conditions. Eggs ingested before they have matured cannot grow into adults. If a dog defecates inside the facility, the floor should be cleaned and disinfected with bleach, and litter boxes should be regularly disinfected with bleach as well, if they have been used by cats that are known to be worm positive or suspected to be. There is one other kind of roundworm called Toxocaris leonina. It can affect both dogs and cats, but the control measures are the same as for the two species of Toxocara. On the right, we have tapeworms. There are two genera that I'm going to talk about, Echinococcus and Taenia. And Echinococcus is divided into two relevant species for our purposes, canadensis and multilocularis. Echinococcus canadensis is a tapeworm with adults that also live in dog intestines, as with the roundworms discussed above. Dogs consume juveniles and infected meat, usually that of deer, which become adults and then begin shedding eggs about 6 weeks later. The eggs can survive in the environment for months or years, and while they are not infectious to dogs, they can infect humans. The eggs, however, do very poorly in very dry environments and can be destroyed using bleach, which is similar to roundworms. Echinococcus multilocularis can affect cats and dogs, and Taenia affects both species as well, but the eggs can be destroyed using similar measures. I'll just briefly discuss two other types of worms that are somewhat common in shelter environments. Hookworms of the genus Ancylostoma can be found in shelters at times. These eggs are very easy to get rid of. Bleach again is going to work, or making the environment very dry. And it's probably even easier to get rid of hookworm eggs than it is to get rid of tapeworm or roundworm eggs. Whipworms, on the other hand, are much more resistant to those control measures of bleach and making the environment dry. And one source that I read jokingly talked about using a flamethrower to try to get rid of them. So definitely better to try to prevent those from coming into the shelter than trying to eradicate them from the shelter. Dogs and cats are susceptible to a number of ectoparasites, which are parasites that live on the outside of the animal. Fleas are one of the big ones here. Um, the fleas can affect both dogs and cats, and they should be targeted with an aerosol spray that kills all life stages. Or the environment should, rather. In a case of flea infestation, it is very important to purge the environment of fleas because that's where the majority of them will be located at any given time, not on the animals. Therefore, if the animals are treated, but the environment is not, the fleas in the environment will rapidly reinfest the animals. The aerosol spray should be applied especially to areas that are hard to keep perfectly dry, because that's where fleas like to hang out in those somewhat damp environments. Carpets and floors should be vacuumed regularly, and bedding, toys, and grooming equipment should be thoroughly washed. This also goes for a number of other ectoparasites like lice, which mostly exist on the host animal, not in the environment as much. Caliciella, a type of mite. Otodectes, which is the ear mite that usually affects cats and also prefers cool and damp conditions. And Sarcoptes, another type of mite. So in summary, some of the rules that you're going to want to live by to maintain biosecurity in the shelter environment. Number one, you're going to want to clean areas of possible contamination using bleach. You want to ensure that the facility environment as a whole is as dry as possible because that makes it a lot harder for lots of parasites to survive. And you will routinely want to wash all items that come into contact with shelter animals, especially toys, bedding, grooming equipment, and so on. And if you are able to stick by these principles, you are going to keep most of your animals pretty happy, just like this cat here in the picture. Thank you.